This is a tree on the shore of Lake Burley Griffin in the capital of Australia, Canberra. And I'm using a 2B Staedtler Mars Lumograph pencil on some 210 GSM drawing cartridge. It's a smoothish but not a super smooth surface. And I think this is a great technique for fast gestural drawing of trees, of foliage in general, which is always suitable for location sketches. So, as always, I start by outlining the main parts of the tree canopy. Now you'll see that this tree has very long branches, very long trunks coming up from the base, and I decided to condense the tree, to rearrange it a little bit, both to make it more interesting and also to suit the size of paper that I was drawing. Rather than have these long lengths of tree, I wanted to have more of a feature of the foliage. So I shorten these two long branches of the fork, so to speak, and I join them just above ground level. So it's really the canopy. You can see the lower part of that tree there in the upper left. You'll notice I'm holding my pen halfway back. Whenever we want to draw with a loose gestural style, holding our implement halfway down is a great way of making it easy to do. I think of them as more flicking movements, but that I find works really well for a gestural approach. But gestural does never mean careless. We always have to be in control of what we're doing. So at this point now, I've got those sort of dotted silhouette outlines for the upper parts of the tree canopies. And then I'm using hatching for the more obvious shadowed or shaded areas of the canopy, because we have no chance of drawing leaves. So what we're really drawing is the effect of the shadow or the sunlight on the surface of these approximately rounded bunches of foliage that together make up the canopy. So what we're doing is we're not drawing lots and lots of leaves, we're drawing the effect of the light on the surface of all the leaves massed together. So we're drawing the effect of the detail, which is largely defined by the light and the shadow, rather than the detail. I do have a playlist on drawing trees. If you haven't seen that, you might find some interesting videos there. And not just foliage, but all things related to plants. So there are videos on branches and trunks and flowers and even grass. So you can see an important thing with this is to manipulate the play of light and dark to create definition. So where we have branches or parts of the trunk in sunlight, it's good to have darker foliage behind, foliage in shadow behind. And then we do the opposite, where we have branches that are shaded or shadowed. We try and have sunlight around them behind so that they stand out more. So we're manipulating our darks and lights to both create contrast and to avoid also the ambiguity, the visual ambiguity, particularly working in monochrome, where we have values of different objects or different elements of the one object side by side that are too close together in value. We want to use value to create distinction as well as visual interest. So I'm now just working at some of these canopies that are at the top. You're watching this at time and a quarter. So this is not much more than my actual drawing time. This took me, I think, 16 minutes to draw in real time. The important thing I find in doing a subject such as this, where there is an awful lot of fairly repetitive lines and marks for a very similar purpose, is to make sure I discipline myself to keep constantly looking up at my reference, whether it's a photo next to me or a tree in front of me, as in this case. Because if we don't, what starts to happen is we draw from memory. And when we draw from memory, there's just as much chance that we'll be drawing from memories of trees that aren't this particular tree. And so our tree starts to look less and less like this distinctive specimen and more like what I call generic trees. Trees that often don't look much like any tree at all, and more like every tree in general. That's what we want to avoid. We want all of our trees to look as if they're real trees. And the best way to do that is to stay disciplined in our observation and our drawing so that we draw the real tree that we see. Now, at this stage, it's still mostly just defining darker and lighter areas, but you can see that some of the areas of hatching are darker than others, either because I hatch more over the top of the one small area or because I use heavier lines. So you can see that I'm going to have to bring my tree trunks together much closer than in life, than in that very tall effect that we have. But I liked the top of the tree. I liked the canopy. It was the canopy that was around me at the time that gave me the most appeal to try and draw. And I thought it would make a good example because we had a lot of canopy on top and in the center, but then we had this wonderful large section of canopy in the lower center part of the tree. So on the far side of the tree, on the other side of these trunks. And it's really important when we draw trees that we remember that they are 360 degrees. They don't just go up and out on each side, but they come towards us, they go away from us, and they angle at 45 degrees on each side of the center line, both towards us and backwards. And all of this creates different effects. When they come towards us, branches are foreshortened. When they angle out at 45 degrees from us, they're foreshortened, but not as much. When they go out parallel to us, then we tend to see the full extent of the branch. And we want to have a sense that our branches are moving in all of these directions. And the easiest way to do that is to draw what we see in front of us. So I am taking some liberties with this because at the end of the day, I want to have an interest in tree drawing, and no one's going to be comparing it to the actual tree. Now, another reason why I find it's better to start from the top of the tree and to work down is I find it lets us have far more credible branches. One consistent weakness I see of tree drawings, regardless of whether they're drawn on location or from photos, is that the trunks start off at ground level, and that's usually where people seem to start, at ground level with the trunks. And then firstly the trunks are drawn too wide, and then the first large branches are also too wide, and then there simply isn't room between where the branches enter the tree canopy and the edge of the tree canopy at the top or sides of the tree. There's simply not room for those branches to get thinner and thinner and thinner until they all become twigs. And so it makes the tree look very awkward. Now, sometimes trees are heavily pruned, and if the pruning is all within the tree canopy, then we can get that effect. But more often, this happens in drawings of trees because simply the trunks started off too thick for the size of the tree on the paper, for the scale that we're drawing. And so there simply isn't room on the paper to have that canopy fit on those branches. And I find that if I start thin and widen the branches as I come down, then they end up being a much happier, a much more realistic scale for the overall size of the tree. So if that makes sense, why not give it a go? So I'm now doing the lowest part of this canopy that sits behind, and it has a nice anchoring effect, and I think it balances nicely the lighter areas on the top. Now, most of my hatching lines are sort of basically vertical, but with particularly some of the lower ones starting to just angle to the left or right more. And I'm trying to reflect the overall feel of the canopy without suggesting leaves. The problem when we draw trees is if we do marks that suggest individual leaves, we change the sense of scale. We can make a very large tree seem a lot smaller because on a very large tree we don't see individual leaves. So if our marks look as though they're individual leaves, then that tells our brain that the tree is a lot smaller than it really is. And that's why we can see it, because it's a smaller tree and we're closer to it. So keeping a sense of scale is really important if we want to have a sense of the overall size of the tree. And now it's important again to try and maintain a sense of closer or further. You'll notice at the very top of the tree, I go lighter because that part of the tree is not normally the closest part of the foliage, because the top of the tree is in most cases curving away from us, and that there are parts of the tree that are closer, more in the center where branches are coming towards us. And for that reason, we want more definition and more detail to be in the closer parts, and also darker values, because all of these things come forward, and the opposite, less distinct lines and marks and lighter lines and lighter hatching and less hatching, all make something look further away. So we want to manipulate these for the effect we want with our drawing, the effect we want of distance and of form of 3 dimensions. We're always trying to create a sense of 3 dimensions. Now I'm just doing some hatch lines to represent the shadow being cast on the tree trunk, and then I go and do this and I think, why have I done that? Because now it looks just different from all the other hatch marks I made to indicate value, shadow on the value is just light and dark, value on the trunk. And I've used a different technique of colouring it in basically, which means it stands out. And it looks different in a way that's so different I don't want it to. But there's not much I can do about that. I darken some of the other areas with hatching to try and make them look a bit more the same. Here you see me just having a go in the later stages of the drawing. Not quite as late as where I'm at now. We're just about done. My 16 minutes is just about up. And a good loose gestural style that really suits any type of tree. This is an Australian eucalyptus, of course, but this works really with any type, even with firs and pines and even palm trees, it works. What do you think? G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope you found this little dip into the experience of live sketching interesting. Graphite is a great tool to use for location sketching because we can get such a variety of marks and feelings and effects so quickly with the one pencil in our hand. So why not give it a go? I will post this photo on my channel community page if you'd like to have a go drawing it. So why not? It may not be on location for you, but it's still a great drawing to have a go at. But whatever you draw, however you draw it, location or not, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.